participate with us in this devotion of the Holy Rosary that ACE Choir has initiated during this month of May, as this month is dedicated to Our Lady. Let us believe in her intercession and offer her each and every intention through this Holy Rosary. Before we begin, it's a kind request to everyone participating to put your phones in silent mode. Thank you. I would like to share something on the Rosary. While Saint Dominic is known for spreading the devotion of the Rosary throughout the world, it would erroneous to solely give him the title of the Rosary Saint. So many saints have illustrated by their words and actions the beauty and depth of the Rosary. In their own generation and environments, they encourage the fervor for the divine garland of roses. In fact, it is because of the countless witnesses of the communion of saints that we can have confidence that the Rosary is a powerful tool of healing, conversion, and for discerning God's will. There is no greater testimony than how they lived. We can trust their words and we should follow their example. A thought on Rosary of Saint Padre Pio. The Rosary is the weapon for these times. Saint Jose Maria Escriva says, "The Holy Rosary is a powerful weapon. Use it with confidence and you will be amazed at the results. If you say the Holy Rosary every day with a spirit of faith and love, Our Lady will make sure she leads you very far along her Son's path." Say the Holy Rosary. Blessed be that monotony of Hail Marys, which purifies the monotony of your sins. You always leave the Rosary for later, and you end up not saying it at all because you are sleepy. If there is no other time, say it in the street without letting anybody notice it. It will, moreover, help you to have presence of God.
Let us begin the Rosary with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Mary welcoming the Magi. Going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother. Our Lord is always near her Son. These Magi are not received by a king on a high throne, but by a child in the arms of his mother. Let us ask the Mother of God, who is our mother, to prepare us the way that leads to the fullness of love. Her sweet heart knows the shortest path for finding Christ. And now, before starting the Rosary, let us all be contemplative and begin with this beautiful song, "Oh How We Love."
Oh, how we love Mary, to praise you, honor your name, bless you always. You are the mother of Jesus Christ and mother of humankind. You're the glory of
the Rosary, we will reiterate the belief that our church fathers have passed down to us through the centuries from the 400s. And the prayer, we begin it with the Apostles' Creed. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and so as we begin this Rosary, we remember and reiterate the prayer, the belief that has been handed down to us through the church fathers. Apostles' Creed. I believe in God,
the
Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, His only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. On the third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven, and is seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From there he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
For faith, hope, love, and charity, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Today, as it is Monday, we will remember Jesus in his infancy and childhood through this joyful mystery. The first joyful mystery, the Annunciation. Dear Mama, in this decade, we remember all those people who are going hungry without any resources to sustain themselves, especially for those who are devoid of parents in these months. For this, we ask you for your intercession, Mom Mary. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen.
O Mother, lead us towards the fullness of love. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
The second joyful mystery, the visitation. In this mystery, Lord, I offer all those people who fail to accept or are struggling to accept their gender. Lord, give them the grace to accept your gift, the body, which contains your spirit. Help them, Lord, to see the beauty of their gender. For this I pray. Mama Mary, please intercede for this intention. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen.
O Mother, lead us towards the fullness of love. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Third joyful mystery, the birth of our Lord. We pray for all the women who are conceiving. Lord, give them good physical and mental health. And we also pray for the good health of newborn babies who took birth today. Mama Mary, do intercede for this intention. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy.
O Mother, lead us towards the fullness of love. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Fourth joyful mystery, the presentation in the temple. Dear Mama Mary, you presented child Jesus in the temple to the Lord as per the requirements of the law. In this decade, we pray for all parents that they may be able to understand the talents of their children and accordingly help them to choose their career, as this is the time when most of the children who have appeared their board exams will be selecting their streams. The choice of study for higher education help the parents to be able to understand the talents that Lord has given them and support their child in selecting those talents in those courses that will help them nurture their talent and help the parents so that they do not get inclined towards those courses only which are in trend or which only give monetary benefit. For this, Mama Mary, please intercede. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen.
O Mother, lead us towards the fullness of love. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Fifth joyful mystery, the finding of Jesus in the temple. In this, we pray for all the priests, nuns, bishop, and lay people who lead the churches, parishes, and dioceses. May they work selflessly for the growth of faith. May they not only rely on money as the only resource to build the church. May they overcome every temptation of selfishness, pride, and jealousy. Let their lives inspire other souls to come nearer to Christ. O Mama, protect your people and lead them. Please continue to intercede. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy.
Amen.
O Mother, lead us towards the fullness of love. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Let us conclude this rosary with Hail Holy Queen. Hail Holy Queen,
Mother of mercy, hail our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Turn then, O most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy towards us, and after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Amen.
now as we go into the litany of the Blessed Virgin Mary, I request all of you, if it's possible, to kneel and show devotion to our Mother.
Litany of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Christ have mercy.
Christ have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Christ hear us.
Christ graciously hear us.
God the Father of heaven.
Have mercy on us.
God the Son, Redeemer of the world.
Have mercy on us.
God the Holy Spirit.
Have mercy on us.
Holy Trinity, one God.
Have mercy on us.
Your response will be, pray for us. Holy Mary,
Pray for us.
Holy Mother
Mother of God,
pray for us.
Holy Virgin of Virgins,
Pray for us.
Mother of Christ,
Pray for us.
Mother of Divine Grace,
Pray for us.
Mother most pure,
Pray for us.
Mother most chaste,
Pray for us.
Mother inviolate,
Pray for us.
Mother undefiled,
Pray for us.
Mother most amiable,
Pray for us.
Mother most admirable,
Pray for us.
Mother of good counsel,
Pray for us.
Mother of our Creator,
Pray for us.
Mother of our Savior,
Pray for us.
Virgin most prudent,
Pray for us.
Virgin most venerable,
Pray for us.
Virgin most renowned,
Pray for us.
Virgin most powerful,
Pray for us.
Virgin most merciful,
Pray for us.
Virgin most faithful,
Pray for us.
Mirror of justice,
Pray for us.
Seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Cause of our joy,
Pray for us.
Spiritual vessel,
Pray for us.
Vessel of honor,
Pray for us.
Singular vessel of devotion,
Pray for us.
Mystical rose,
Pray for us.
Star of David,
Pray for us.
Star of ivory,
Pray for us.
House of gold,
Pray for us.
Ark of the covenant,
Pray for us.
Gate of heaven,
Pray for us.
Morning star,
Pray for us.
Health of the sick,
Pray for us.
Refuge of sinners,
Pray for us.
Comforter of the afflicted,
Pray for us.
Help of Christians,
Pray for us.
Queen of angels,
Pray for us.
Queen of patriarchs,
Pray for us.
Queen of prophets,
Pray for us.
Queen of apostles,
Pray for us.
Queen of martyrs,
Pray for us.
Queen of confessors,
Pray for us.
Queen of virgins,
Pray for us.
Queen of all saints,
Pray for us.
Queen conceived without original sin,
Pray for us.
Queen assumed into heaven,
Pray for us.
Queen of the most holy rosary,
Pray for us.
Queen of peace,
Pray for us.
Queen of the family.
Pray for us.
Your response will be, spare us, O Lord. Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world,
Spare us, O Lord.
your response will be, graciously hear us, O Lord. Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world,
Graciously hear us, O Lord.
your response will be, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world,
Have mercy on us,
pray for us, O Holy Mother of God.
that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ.
Let us pray. Grant, we
Beseech thee, O Lord God, that we, thy servants, may enjoy perpetual health of mind and body, and by the glorious intercession of the Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, be delivered from the present sorrow and enjoy eternal happiness through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us all remember our Mother Mary and say this memorare. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary,
That never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession, was left unaided. Inspired with this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
let us all repeat this special prayer by Pope Francis during this time of pandemic COVID-19. We fly to your protection, O
O Holy Mother of God, in the present tragic situation, when the whole world is prey to suffering and anxiety, we fly to you, Mother of God, and our Mother, and seek refuge under your protection. Virgin Mary, turn your merciful eyes towards us amid this coronavirus pandemic. Comfort those who are distraught and mourn their loved ones who have died and at times are buried in a way that grieves them deeply. Be close to those who are concerned for their loved ones, who are sick and who, in order to prevent the spread of disease, cannot be close to them. Fill with hope those who are troubled by the uncertainty of the future and the consequences for the economy and employment. Mother of God and our Mother, pray for us to God, the Father of mercies, that this great suffering may end and that hope and peace may dawn on you. Plead with your divine Son, as you did at Cana, so that the families of the sick and the victims be comforted, and their hearts be opened to confidence and trust. Protect those doctors, nurses, health workers, and volunteers who are on the front line of this emergency and are risking their lives to save others. Support their heroic effort and grant them strength, generosity, and continued help. Be close to those who assist the sick night and day, and to priests who in their pastoral concern and fidelity to the gospel are trying to help and support everyone. Blessed Virgin, illumine the minds of men and women engaged in scientific research, that they may find effective solutions to overcome this virus. Support national leaders, that with wisdom, solicitude, and generosity they may come to the aid of those lacking the basic necessities of life, and may devise social and economic solutions inspired by farsightedness and solidarity. Mary most holy, stir our consciences, so that the enormous funds invested in developing and stockpiling arms will instead be spent on promoting effective research on how to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Beloved Mother, help us realize that we are all members of one great family, and to recognize the bond that unites us, so that in a spirit of fraternity and solidarity we can help to alleviate countless situations of poverty and need. Make us strong in faith, persevering in service, constant in prayer. May, in consolation of the afflicted, embrace all your children in distress, and pray that God will stretch out His all-powerful hand and free us from this terrible pandemic, so that life can serenely resume its normal course. To you, who shine on our journey as a sign of salvation and hope, do we entrust ourselves, O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Amen.
Let us all continue with this beautiful hymn, Ave Maria.
As I kneel before you, as I bow my head in prayer, take this day, make it yours, and fill me with your love. Ave Maria. Gracia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu. All I have I give you, every dream and wish I yours. Mother of Christ, Mother of mine, present them to my Lord. Ave Maria, Gracia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu, benedicta tu.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Virgin Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Faustina,
Pray for us.
Saint Mother Teresa,
Pray for us.
Saint Josemaria Escriva.
Pray for us.
Let's make sign of the cross.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, brothers and sisters, and my dear friends, for joining us in this rosary that we do every day for the month of May, starting from 5 o'clock in the evening. And following this Holy Rosary, we will continue with the Holy Virtual Mass. Please do join us shortly as we prepare ourselves for the Holy Mass.
welcomes you to this virtual Holy Mass. This Mass was celebrated in the Archdiocese of Toronto by Father Henk. Before beginning the Mass, I request everyone to keep your phones in silent mode. Thank you. Let's make sign of the cross in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's rise for entrance hymn.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you.
And with your
And as we have placed ourselves before the Lord on this Monday, realizing that we're just broken human beings and that we need God's guidance at every breath we take. You were sent to heal the contrite of heart. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have
You came to call sinners. Christ, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
You are seated at the right hand of the Father to intercede for us. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
May Almighty God have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to everlasting life. And let us pray. May your right hand, O Lord, we pray, encompass your people with perpetual help, so that defending from all wickedness by the resurrection of your only begotten Son, we may make our way by means of your heavenly gifts. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen.
In today's first reading, we will get to know that Paul and Barnabas were proclaiming the good news.
A reading from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 14, verses 5 to 18. And when an attempt was made by both Gentiles and Jews with their rulers to mistreat them and to stone them, the apostles learned of it and fled to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia and to the surrounding country. And there they continued proclaiming the good news. Paul and Barnabas in Lystra and Derbe. In Lystra, there was a man sitting who could not use his feet and had never walked, for he had been crippled from birth. He listened to Paul as he was speaking, and Paul, looking at him intently and seeing that he had faith to be healed, said in a loud voice, "Stand up upright on your feet." And the man sprang up and began to walk. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in a Lycaonian language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. The priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates. He and the crowds wanted to offer sacrifice. When the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of it, they tore their clothes and rushed out into the crowd, shouting, "Friends, why are you doing this? We are mortals just like you, and we bring you good news, that you should turn from these worthless things to the living God, who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. In past generations, he allowed all the nations to follow their own ways. Yet, he has not left himself without a witness in doing good, giving you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, and filling you with food and your hearts with joy." Even with these words, they scarcely restrained in the crowds from offering sacrifice to them. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Not to us, O Lord, but to your name give the glory. Not to us, O Lord, but to your name give the glory. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory. For the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness, why should the nations say, "Where is their God?" Not to us, O Lord, but to your name give the glory. Our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. Not to us, O Lord, but to your name give the glory. May you be blessed by the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to human beings. Not to us, O Lord, but to your name give the glory.
Let's all rise for acclamation.
Alleluia, 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 alleluia. The Holy Spirit will teach you all things and remind you of all I have said to you. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
In today's Gospel reading, we will hear that Jesus says to his disciples that those who love him will keep the commandments.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. During the supper, Jesus said to the disciples, "They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me, and those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them." Judas, not the Iscariot, said to him, "Lord, how is it that you will reveal yourself to us and not to the world?" Jesus answered him, "Those who love me will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make a home with them. Whoever does not love me does not keep my words, and the words that you hear is not mine, but is from the Father who sent me. I have said these things to you while I'm still with you. But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have said to you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything. How simple, how easy. But of course, in the real world, it's not that easy. Yes, the Father, the Holy Spirit teaches us. We have to be open to it. But we're also a broken people. I'm a broken person. And we enter the messiness of life. And we get a good idea of this, in a sense, at our first reading. Paul is, of course, a super apostle, and he is preaching in Iconium and Lystra. And in one place he's being rejected and they're going to stone him. In another place, Lystra, they're going to raise him like he's a god. Preaching good weather and bad weather. But Paul was very single-minded, very strong individual, but he was also a broken human being, and we often forget that it is so. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11, 24-25, he says, 5 times I was received from the Jews 40 lashes times -1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was received stoned, and 3 times I was shipwrecked. For a night and a day I was adrift at sea. And Paul, very single-minded, very strong. But Paul, just like us, like me, was also a broken human being. And Paul, I can see also when we read scripture, especially the letters of St. Paul, that he was also very human. And in Galatians, if you go to the letter of Galatians, Paul stops short of really swearing. He's very angry with the Galatians. But in that, God is at work. God is at work in our broken humanity. And as we listen to the Spirit, yes, listen to the Spirit and to become more and more instruments of God in our families, at work, or wherever we are. But as broken human beings, we're also beings who will lose their patience. Sometimes we will say things we shouldn't say, or do things we shouldn't do. But in that, God is at work. And I think, especially in the way we live every life, in our families, I live in a religious community, at work, wherever we are. It is one thing to preach the word of God. It's another thing to be humble. And to be humbly is not a simple thing. If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm so humble, sorry, you're filled with pride." But being humble is basically, in layman's term, is also eating dirt. To be able to apologize. To be able to say, yes, I should not have said this. Or yes, I was pushing my own agenda. Yes, I was insensitive. It is very much listening to the Holy Spirit. It's not all about nice and fuzzy and cozy and all of that. No. It is also very much looking inward at our shadows. Everyone has shadows. And so, for instance, with St. Paul, his great gift was to be very strong, moving forward no matter what. If he got beaten or not, it didn't matter. But his shadow, being impatient. Sometimes, I'm sure, he was not easy to live with. And this is for us too. This is for me, to even as a priest. Yes, I want people to come to God. Yes, I want people to listen to the Holy Spirit. I spend as much time as possible listening to the Holy Spirit, especially in these difficult times of the pandemic. But it is also to be able to say, especially as we have been spent a lot of time together in families and so on, or communities, and where we get impatient to say, yep, I was pushing it, yep, I didn't step out of it and went for a walk. Evangelizing is really walking the walk as broken human beings. Nobody is perfect. None of us are perfect. Each one of us has been given unique God-given gifts. No one is exempt. If someone says to me, I don't have any, God didn't give me any gifts. Yes, you have gifts. Let's try to discover that. But at the same time, we also have to be in touch with our brokenness, or lesser gifts, as I say. And often, the ones around us will see our brokenness. We often don't see that. Am I open to those loved ones who say, you're pushing it a little bit, or no, back off a little bit? Those around us who know us best, they can correct us, and we're called to be open to that. Just like in a really good marriage, where a couple has lived many years together, it is also about mutual appreciation and mutual correction. And especially even with grandchildren and extended families, it's continuously being kind to one another and correcting one another in God. And it's very much listening to the Holy Spirit. And so let us bring our prayers before the Lord. And let us pray for all those in the daily TV Mass community who have asked to be included in our prayer intention book, especially those asking for peace in their families. We pray to the Lord. We pray for families, especially for married and single parents who desire to show their children the way to everlasting life. We pray to the Lord. We pray for all those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially those who are struggling financially, emotionally, or spiritually. We pray to the Lord. And let us also pray for all those who mourn the death of a loved one. And for this we pray to the Lord. And for these prayers, and the prayers in the silence of our own hearts, we lift them up to you, Lord. Amen. Pray, sisters and brothers, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God, the Almighty Father.
May the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands, for the praise and glory of his name, for our good and good of all.
May your prayers rise up to you, O Lord, together with the sacrificial offerings, so that purified by your graciousness, we may be conformed to the mysteries of your mighty love, through Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
The Lord be with you. Lift up your hearts.
Lift them up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right and just.
It is truly right and just, our duty and our salvation at all times to acclaim you, O Lord, but in this time above all to laud you yet more gloriously when Christ our Passover has been sacrificed. Through him the children of light rise to eternal life, and the halls of heavenly kingdom are thrown open to the faithful, for his death is a ransom from death, and in his rising the life of all has risen. Therefore, overcome with paschal joy, every land, every people exalts in your praise, and even the heavenly powers with the angelic host sing together the unending hymn of your glory as they acclaim. You are indeed holy, O Lord, the fount of all holiness. Make holy, therefore, these gifts, we pray, by sending down your Spirit upon them like the dewfall, so that they may become for us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the time he was betrayed and entered willingly into his passion, he took bread and, giving you thanks, broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it. For this is my body, which will be given up for you."
My Lord, my God.
In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took the chalice, and once more giving thanks, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. For this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you and for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me."
My Lord, my God.
The mystery of faith.
We proclaim your death, O
Therefore, as we celebrate the memorial of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation, giving thanks that you have held us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that, partaking of the body and blood of Christ, we may be gathered into one by the Holy Spirit. Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, and bring her to the fullness of charity, together with Francis our Pope, Thomas our Bishop, the Canadian bishops, the clergy, and the entire people you have called your own. Remember also our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who have died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Have mercy on us all, we pray, that with the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God, with Blessed Joseph, her spouse, with the blessed apostles and all the saints who have pleased you throughout the ages, we may merit to be co-heirs to eternal life, and may praise and glorify you through your Son, Jesus Christ. Through him, and with him, and in him, O God, Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours forever and ever. Amen. And at the Saviour's command, and formed by divine teaching, we dare to say,
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our days, that by the help of your mercy we may be always free from sin and safe from all distress, as we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Saviour, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours. Amen.
Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you. Look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and graciously grant her peace and unity in accordance with your will, who live and reign forever and ever."
Amen.
The peace of the Lord be with you always.
And with your spirit.
And let us offer each other a sign of peace.
Lamb of God,
You take away the sin of the world. Have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world. Have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world. Grant us peace.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb. Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed. May the body of Christ keep me safe for eternal life.
Since we cannot receive the Holy Communion now, let us remember our first Holy Communion and best moment when we received the body and blood of Christ. Remembering that, let us partake in this spiritual communion by saying this prayer together. O Immaculate Queen of heaven and earth, Mother of God and Creator of every grace, I believe that your dearly beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, is truly, really, and substantially contained in the most holy sacrament. I love him above all things and long to receive him in my heart. Since now I cannot receive him sacramentally, be so good to place him spiritually in my soul and never permit me to be separated from him. Amen. Let us say the prayer after communion of St. Thomas Aquinas. I thank you, Lord,
Almighty Father, everlasting God, for having been pleased, through no merit of mine, but of your great mercy alone, to feed me, a sinner, and your unworthy servant, with the precious body and blood of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. I pray that this Holy Communion may not be for my judgment and condemnation, but for my pardon and salvation. Let this Holy Communion be to me an armor of faith and a shield of goodwill, a cleansing of all vices and rooting out of all evil desires. May it increase love and patience, humility and obedience, and all virtues. May it be a firm defense against the evil designs of all my visible and invisible enemies, a perfect quieting of all the desires of soul and body. May this Holy Communion bring about a perfect union with you, the one true God, and at last enable me to reach eternal bliss when you will call me. I pray that you bring me, a sinner, to the indescribable feast, where you, with your Son and the Holy Spirit, are to your saints true light, full blessedness, everlasting joy, and perfect happiness, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us say a prayer for priest of Saint Therese of Lisieux. O Jesus,
Eternal priest, keep your priests within the shelter of your sacred heart, where none may touch them. Keep unstained their anointed hands, which daily touch your sacred body. Keep unsullied their lips, daily purpled with your precious blood. Keep pure and unearthly their hearts, sealed with the sublime mark of the priesthood. Let your holy love surround them and shield them from the world's contagion. Bless their labors with abundant fruit, and may the souls to whom they minister be their joy and consolation, here and in heaven, their beautiful and everlasting crown. Amen.
And let us pray. Almighty ever-living God, who restore us to eternal life in the resurrection of Christ, increase in us, we pray, the fruits of this Paschal Sacrament, and pour into our hearts the strength of this saving food, through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. Thanks be to God.
Since we're most loved by a God.
Mary, intercede for all of us that we may be open to the Holy Spirit, Abba Father, Holy Spirit and Abba Father, and Lord Jesus. Be with us, give us the strength that everybody has a shadow, everybody has a dark side of them. Everybody have. Help us, Mama Mary, give us the strength that we may face that darkness with Jesus' light. Help us that we may always stick to Holy Spirit. If we are listening to it, if we are able to listen, Holy Spirit, help us, Lord, that we may apply in our life. Help us that no shadows can become barrier to listen the Holy Spirit, which every time teaches us to love God, to love others, and accept the correction and create a good surrounding where Abba Father, Jesus and Holy Spirit can reside. Be with us, intercede for us, Mama Mary, and do pray for us that always we can walk in the light and be true to our own self and Father. For this we pray, our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary,
Full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
let's say the Memorare together. Remember,
O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that any man who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession, was left unaided. Inspired with this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. O Queen of Heaven, rejoice now. Hallelujah. Rejoice, for he who married no despair. Hallelujah. He is risen as he foretold. Hallelujah. Pray for us to the Father. Hallelujah. Rejoice and be glad, O Virgin Mary. Hallelujah. For the Lord has truly risen. Hallelujah. Let us pray. O God, you deign to give joy to the world through the resurrection of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Grant, we beseech you, that through his mother, the Virgin Mary, we may obtain the joys of everlasting life. Through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit,
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Virgin Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Faustina,
Pray for us.
Saint Mother Teresa,
Pray for us.
Saint John Paul II,
Pray for us.
Saint Jose Maria Scriva.
Pray for us.
Let's make sign of the cross in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for joining us in this virtual Holy Mass. Have a blessed evening ahead. Stay safe and take precautions. As the month of May is devoted to Mother Mary, His choir has taken the initiative to pray the daily rosary at 5 o'clock in the evening. Do join us. Thank you.